Part 20. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 192. Jia Yan looked expectantly in the air at the blue-gray pebbles landing below. This pebble had long since disappeared. It's falling down. Jia Yanfu looked down. But not long after, a hint of disappointment appeared in his compound eyes. After such a long time, the blue-gray pebbles should have reached the ground long ago, but there was no reaction at all. Jia Yan's body flew downwards. Now it's funny, I have to slowly look for that pebble in the vast barren mountains. That's right, Jia Yan is conducting experiments on projecting blue-gray pebbles. If those bluish-gray pebbles were, as he suspected, the source of energy for the metal monsters, then their final explosion energy would definitely be these bluish-gray pebbles. And now is the time for him to try it. According to the characteristics of the blue-gray pebbles he guessed, they should be extremely easy to explode at this time. If they can explode successfully, their power will be a replica of the explosion power of those metal monsters. That was an explosive power that could make even Jia Yan fearful. If I remember correctly, during a previous attack, I cut out the entire heart of a metal monster from its chest. The monster was killed instantly and disappeared on the spot. The ability to self-destruct is good, but that time, the heart still exploded. Fortunately, I was under the attack of sonic speed and escaped the scope of the explosion first, otherwise I would definitely have been affected. Jia Yan's compound eyes were dim. He didn't think that his line of thinking was wrong. At that time, the metal monster should have completely lost control of its heart, but it still blew itself up. Jia Yan only remembered that because he was under the attack of sonic speed, he used great power, and the heart was being destroyed by Jia Yan. After violently cutting out the metal monster's body, it hit the concrete floor violently, and then an explosion occurred. So does this mean that these bluish-gray pebbles have a special characteristic, that is, they explode when they are not metal monsters? It can also be caused by violent collisions from external forces. What caused the explosion? If this characteristic is true, then Jia Yan's idea of long-range attack really has to fall on these blue-gray pebbles. Although these may be related to the next evolution, used as ammunition or something. It would be more wasteful, but if it could make up for Jia Yan's disadvantage of not having long-range attacks, that's considered value for money. After all, Jia Yan was extremely frightened by the self-destruction power of the metal monster. If only he could master a similar powerful weapon. That is simply replacing a shotgun with a cannon, and we will fight in the future. It's simply one more weapon. Moreover, the method to obtain this sharp weapon is very simple and does not require any processing. There are so many benefits. Using them as a temporary long-range attack means, I don't know how to describe it. But the first attempt failed. Jia Yan was a little disappointed this time. But maybe the reason for the failure was not his wrong guess, but other objective factors. It probably has something to do with the location. The ground in this barren mountain is really too soft. If the blue-gray pebbles have explosive properties, they can't explode so easily. Otherwise, those metal monsters will explode just by touching them. Wouldn't it be useless? No fighting ability at all. He still hasn't lost faith. Found it? After Jia Yan searched the ground of the barren mountain for a while, Jia Yan finally found the small bluish-gray stone that gave off a faint light near the ground he was looking for. He picked up the pebble with his front feet. Jia Yan's front feet were already huge enough to pick up such a small thing, so he had to be very careful. But this is more in line with Jia Yan's needs. If it needs to carry heavy missiles like those human fighter jets, it will definitely be a huge burden on Jia Yan's flying ability, and his flexibility and acceleration capabilities will have a huge impact. And if it is this kind of blue-gray pebbles, then things will be easier to handle. Jia Yan looked at the pebble in his forefoot. Although he failed for the first time, his expectations for this thing became stronger and stronger. He took to the sky again. Since this first attempt failed, then I will try a more powerful collision, Jia Yan thought in his heart. His speed becomes even faster. Reached the speed of sound in an instant. Then the big mosquito in the air threw the blue-gray pebbles on its front feet downwards. If a small stone is thrown at the speed of sound, then the small stone will fly at the speed of sound and hit the bottom at extremely high speed. The impact itself, even if it is just a small ordinary stone, will have terrible consequences. The destructive power is not much different from that of a large caliber sniper bullet. And under Jia Yan's expectant eyes this time, the blue-gray pebbles below that hit the boundary of the barren mountain suddenly caused waves of fluctuations. Afterwards, under changes that Jia Yan could not see clearly, it completely exploded. A pure blue material power emanates. And this power seemed to appear due to some mysterious chemical change, and it actually turned into a blood-red color. This blood-red eruption caused a huge explosion at a speed that could not be described in ordinary time. Boom boom boom. Under Jia Yan's slightly joyful gaze, the ground on the barren mountain finally burst into bursts of bright light. Finally, the bright light exploded. Flames filled the sky and billowing dust soared directly into the air, almost reaching Jia Yan. It's done. Jia Yan in the air looked at the scenery below, and his heart was filled with surprise. The power of this explosion is not bad at all compared to the self-destruction power of those metal monsters, and it even seems to be a little stronger than them. Maybe the power of this explosion depends on whether the blue-gray stone has a lot of blue color. If not, it probably won't be very powerful, Jia Yan guessed. The barren mountains below were swept up by a huge explosion, and a hurricane swept up, blowing the trees further away. Due to the huge power of the explosion, a huge explosion with a diameter of about 17 or 18 meters was formed on the ground. Potholes. This power is really terrifying, and the flame formed by the explosion is the most terrifying thing. Jia Yan will not forget that he was in the self-destruction of the metal monster. Burned by flames. And that kind of penetrating power is almost willing to kill him. And now, he has actually mastered that power. Jia Yan's heart felt slightly warm. With this power, he has long-range attack capabilities, as well as group attack capabilities. All have been extended and developed, which is simply a milestone and huge progress. Jia Yan's body began to return. In addition to being excited, he was also a little calm. He thought, now I only have a total of 41 blue-gray pebbles in my hands. This blue-gray pebble may be a boost for his next evolution. If it is not a last resort, Jia Yan still doesn't want the hard-earned blue-gray pebble. Just such a loss. And if you use them to attack metal monsters, God knows if the blue-gray pebbles in the body of the metal monster will also be blown away. Although judging from the results of the previous battle, it seems that the metal monsters have strong earthquake resistance, and the self-destruction of their companions does not have much impact on the blue-gray pebbles in their bodies. But this possibility is not impossible, and this explosive attack is not his sonic attack. Maybe if those metal monsters are still alive after the explosion, they will still launch a suicidal self-destruction attack on him. The more you think about it, the more irrational things become. But in general, the explosive properties of this blue-gray pebble were discovered by Jia Yan, which is still a huge discovery. For him now, it can be regarded as a unique and flexible attack method. Of course, the actual combat effect of this attack method can only be concluded in actual combat. Jia Yan didn't have too many blue-gray pebbles to conduct more experiments. He feels bad. The one that exploded just now seemed to explode in his heart, making his heart bleed. Within a few minutes, Jia Yan returned to the rooftop of his home again. This time, Jia Yan could no longer hear the sound of his family moving, and the lights in the entire building had been turned off. It seemed that they were completely asleep. Sleep peacefully, I will protect you. Jia Yan's huge figure stood on the rooftop, his 6 legs firmly grasping the ground, and his pair of compound eyes looking faintly at the white fish belly scenery in the distance. Oh, it's almost dawn. In one night, too many things happened. Jia Yan had just returned from Japan, but he didn't expect that as soon as he came back, there would be a series of battles. He was also extremely tired. The battle with that small group of metal monsters almost made him reach the upper limit of the limit flight time. He had already known that this upper limit was about half an hour, but the battle at night also used sonic flight and lasted close to half an hour. Although I also want to take a rest, a new day has begun again, so I have no choice but to lie down for a while. Jia Yan was really tired. After seeing the fish-belly white sky, he had no choice but to crawl down. Time did not allow him to sleep, so he could only lie down and rest for a while. The sun is shining, today is going to be a beautiful day. However, compared to the beauty of the sunshine, the people bathing in the sunshine are not in a good mood. The situation at this time has become even more corrupt. The vast Earth, the vast area controlled by humans, actually lost a larger area of land overnight. Today, some news media finally put the title World War III in newspapers and websites. That's right, the intimidating power of metal monsters has finally gained the attention of the entire world. They will call it a world war. It was the beginning of voting for one's own determination. In the morning, more than a dozen major countries finally announced that the country has entered the most urgent state. Stars and Stripes country, China country, Tsarist country, England country, F country, Curry Rice country, Japanese country, German country. One country after another declared a state of emergency. A large number of troops began to gather. Some sealed sensitive weapons have finally been placed on the list of war weapons. Information from major countries begins to communicate closely. The world is really going to change. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 193. It was when Jia Yan was on the rooftop of his home. According to statistics from some countries, the scientific name of the so-called metal monster has also been officially determined by humans. Including the name of Jia Yan, the big mosquito, these monsters seem to appear suddenly and are collectively called abnormal creatures. This war is a war between humans and abnormal creatures. On the one hand are the spirits of the earth, humans, who have ruled the earth for thousands of years. On the other hand are countless monsters that appear out of nowhere. A great war, also known as World War III, is about to begin. However, the unfolding of this incident is also a relatively normal thing. After all, the current metal monsters are becoming more and more threatening to humans on Earth. If the problem of these monsters is not solved as soon as possible, what will the world become? I really don't dare to imagine. Therefore, all the countries on the Earth not only put away their contempt for the so-called metal monsters during this period, but also immediately took major actions and measures in terms of vigorous military development and attack. A series of events, just to start a decisive battle with those countless metal monsters. Compared with metal monsters, the other two types of monsters that have been discovered by humans are less attractive to humans. They are the giant mosquito monsters that have appeared several times. And a giant spider-like monster that only appeared once in China. Compared with the huge number of metal monsters, these two types of monsters are much rarer. Although the giant mosquito monsters have appeared many times in this world and been captured on cameras several times, they are not very cruel after all, and they have records of killing metal monsters, so this kind of monster may be the next one. There won't be much friction with humans down there. As for the three observed 2-meter giant spider-like monsters, this monster had a brief confrontation with the human army when it first appeared, and it has not appeared for such a long time. This can be expected in the future. They will not join the war. In this case, the only ones fighting were humans and the huge metal monster. As for the giant mosquito monster and the giant spider monster with stronger individual combat capabilities, it is not certain that they will join the war. But even with the current situation, the human side is still in a very difficult situation, when all the war analysis reports are placed in front of the military of various countries. Only then did they discover that they had been fighting against the metal monster. Human beings actually have no advantages at all. The number of metal monsters appearing on the entire Earth now exceeds 1.2 million. This is the country with the largest number but a small territory. That was the first Japanese country to report the case of metal monsters. This country can be said to be the most miserable country now. More than a week. The entire Japanese island became a scorched earth. There were as many as 1 million civilian casualties, and the number of the self-defense forces, which numbered more than 200,000, was reduced to more than 100,000. The combat effectiveness of this country is almost half disabled. Next are the Huaxia Kingdom and several other countries with large land areas. Among these countries, Huaxia is the largest, and part of the city has been completely occupied by metal monsters. Those monsters don't know what they are doing in the fallen city. Once a fighter plane approaches, they will attack intensively with red light. No ordinary fighter plane can get close. The strength of metal monsters lies in its defense and attack. The biggest weakness of this monster is that they have a certain usage time limit. Once the upper limit of energy usage is reached, they will completely stop moving and become arbitrary. People slaughter. But this shortcoming is equivalent to none. Earth science researchers once made experimental statistics. In order to use up all the energy of these metal monsters, they would need at least the energy of bombarding and collapsing a building. Such consumption, the metal monsters can control at all. They have a certain amount of energy. Wisdom, some of the traps and mechanisms set by humans are completely useless to them who can collect intelligence from many aspects. So what kind of attack methods should be used against this monster? Although at some meetings, radical figures continued to propose the use of the ultimate nuclear strike method, this plan was overturned every time. Nuclear strikes are too expensive for today's humans. Humans at this time are simply unable to make correct judgments. If they want to drop nuclear weapons on those metal monsters, the world will definitely fall into a greater crisis. However, if nuclear weapons are not used on metal monsters, conventional means will not be able to deal with these monsters. Their defense is really very powerful, and ordinary weapons cannot pose a threat to them. The weapons of this era are too thin, and there have been no large-scale wars on the Earth for a long time. At this time, the army and weapons are in a very scarce state, so the top priority of all countries is to recruit soldiers and develop a large number of weapons. As for the issue of using nuclear weapons, let's put it down for later. After all, this is not an important time to use nuclear weapons. If this weapon is used, it will be like Pandora's box being opened. Even if all the metal monsters are eliminated, the entire world will fall into a more terrifying nuclear threat. What humans don't know is that just when humans are becoming more cautious, those metal monsters are also behaving strangely. They all look like they are not very intelligent, causing damage to human facilities and houses, and some of them are also constructing some facilities on the ground. These built facilities are not like things that an unintelligent race can build. They are like precision constructed houses, even more beautiful than the houses built by humans. These house-like buildings are erected, I don't know what its function is, but it just frightens all the humans who see this scene. The current appearance of those metal monsters is obviously not as simple as some monsters. Many scientists have speculated on the true origins of these monsters, but they really don't want the last thing they want to happen to become a reality. That is, there are other secrets hidden behind their true origins. It is impossible for such a race to exist independently. If they are machines, there must be something that makes them. But can the Earth be able to deal with existences that can create metal monsters? All humans who knew the scene felt extremely heavy. But at this time when human beings were in pain, A giant mosquito monster unknowingly ushered in the morning that belonged to him. The rising morning sun in the sky reflects the giant mosquito's huge figure. This figure has 6 legs, each of which is very powerful. There is a pair of huge wings with wing veins on its abdomen. This pair of wings is controlled by extremely terrifying and powerful muscles, which can enable this big mosquito to fly at the fastest speed. Many residents of Tan City are ready to leave today, but I don't know how my family made the decision. If they also decide to leave, I will naturally follow them. Jia Yan was ready to leave his hometown. After all, his family had packed their things last night, and there was a high possibility of leaving today. The traffic in the city has become a long queue, and people with their families are constantly shouting curses. There are also some people who choose to escape on foot. The trains in this city have been completely stopped some time ago, so if people want to leave, they can only choose to take the road, but taking a car is definitely not a good way. Nowadays, the roads are seriously damaged, and traffic jams are also very common. The speed is not as fast as walking or riding a bicycle. Of course, drivers have their own considerations, and so do cyclists. There is nothing good or bad in this, it is just a matter of choice. The Jia family was really considering leaving. They didn't have much luggage. One person carried a big bag, and Jia Lin was dragging a large leather suitcase in her hand. Perhaps the city has become more chaotic, so no one noticed that Jia Yan, a big mosquito, stayed on the balcony of Jia's house for so long. However, his house was originally located in the suburbs, and not many people would notice it at this time. Notice their house? Father Jia's legs and feet still felt a little uncomfortable. He just carried a small bag. The family of 3 walked to the door of the small building with their luggage, and then they all looked at the building. Just like Jia Yan would look at his house for a long time when he left the house, now the Jia family is also leaving home, and now they are looking at the house that has been with the family for many years. This house witnessed the first few years when the couple got married, then the birth of their son Jia Yan, and then the birth of their daughter Jia Lin, and then the 2 children's growth, playing, going to school, studying, and finally, it also witnessed the Jia Yan's death. It can be said to be ups and downs. I have spent most of my life in this house. After a long time passed, the family of 3 finally came to their senses. Father Jia shook his head and gently closed the big iron door of the house. Squeak. Bang. A big lock locks the iron door. They don't know if there will be a chance to come back in the future, but they will keep the key to their home. Although this key may not be used again, they know that they once had a house. In this place, there is nothing wrong with waiting quietly for the return of the master. Let's go. Jia's father looked older. He was obviously only a man in his 40s, but now he looked like an old man in his 50s or 60s, very weak. Jia Yan was on the rooftop, and he didn't dare to look out to see anything, but through the conversations between his father, mother, and little sister, feelings similar to theirs arose in his heart. This home is also Jia Yan's home. Naturally, he has the same feelings as his family for the place he is about to leave. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 194. But he can come back at any time. After all, with his strength, if he wants to return to this place, it is impossible for an ordinary metal monster team to stop him. But his family members are no longer in this house, so what's the point of him coming back? So Jia Yan's mood at this time is the same as that of his family. This place can, at most, become a place of memories. Alas! Jia Yan let out a long sigh. Originally, he thought that if his family decided to stay, he would fight to the death to protect them, but now his family has chosen to leave more wisely, so Jia Yan's mission will no longer be the same. So heavy. After all, if you stay, you are likely to encounter a large-scale attack by those metal monsters. With Jia Yan's strength, it is possible to protect yourself or escape. After all, he has the advantage of flying, but if you want to protect your family, it is not that simple. So now that his family has chosen wisely to leave, it is also good news for Jia Yan. Jia Yan was still lying on the rooftop of his house, watching the Jia family members slowly walking away in the crowd. The Jia family chose the simplest but most arduous way to leave on foot. The main road has been closed for a long time, and the long traffic queue has blocked the road to a great extent. Some of the more far-sighted families have already chosen to drive away as early as last night. The remaining people, after finding that the road was no longer passable, reluctantly chose to walk. Of course, those driving have nothing to be happy about, because they will soon find that there is also a traffic jam in front of their road. Residents of the city are fleeing one after another, and they are all blocked on the road. It is impossible for them to smoothly enter the safe big city. That's right, although the destinations of people fleeing now are diverse, 90% of them go to big cities. Of course, some people choose places that are relatively remote, but so far there are no metal monsters nearby. For example, the Jia family. Just choose a small city where the Jia family's relatives live. There is an ant of Jia Yan in that city. Although it is not a big city, at least there are no metal monsters in that place, and the relationship between the ant and the Jia family is relatively good. When something happened to Jia Yan, that ant was also one of the first relatives to rush to the scene in Shanghai. Don't go to that ant's house. It takes more than 500 kilometers, and it is almost impossible to take a vehicle on this journey. If you only rely on one pair of legs to walk, it can be said to be extremely difficult. It just so happened that this was the moment when the metal monsters launched a major attack on these fleeing people. It is very possible that under the greatest attack of the metal monsters, he may directly become a victim of the war. Of course, at this time, no one knows what will happen next. They just want to stay away from danger as much as possible and protect their families. Except for those characters who want to make waves in the disaster, everyone else is just ordinary people who want what they want. Just survive, that's all. Hoo ho ho. A slight sound echoed in the sky. The huge black color covered the entire ground. The huge body flew in the sky. This body frightened all the humans below, and some even ran away in panic. The streets were suddenly in a mess. Jia Lin was walking on the street, with her parents in front of her. This girl had just returned from Shanghai not long ago, but even though she had dropped out of school for so long, her academic performance had not deteriorated and she still went to school every day. This made her very happy. The Jia family's parents, who were worried about their daughter, were finally relieved. But Jia Lin doesn't like her parents' more concern now. It's not a good feeling to put the concern for her dead brother on her and make her bear twice the love all the time. Jia Lin still thinks of her brother Jia Yan every day. Every time she returns home, this high school student is still not used to losing her brother. The attack by the metal monster made the little girl a little scared again. She was afraid that she would lose another family member at this time. Although it was a bit unlucky to think like this, she couldn't stop thinking about it. But at this moment, screams suddenly came from behind the little girl. The giant mosquito is coming. It's that giant mosquito. The screams from behind surprised the little girl. Could it be that the giant mosquito monster was the one those people were talking about yesterday? Didn't he help our city get rid of those metal monsters? This is not a good mosquito monster, why are people still afraid of him? The little girl was slightly surprised, then looked back. Then, following the sight of the panicked people, she saw a giant mosquito monster flying in the sky. It was an extremely huge flying creature, with a dark body that reflected the light of the sun. Each of the 6 extremely slender feet is shining brightly, especially the pair of front feet with sharp knife-shaped horns. They are simply indescribably terrifying. I am afraid that the knife-shaped horns are covered with the poison of various creatures. There may be a lot of blood, even human blood. Is that the giant mosquito monster? Jialin looked at the large mosquito flying above her head, with a confused expression on her face. This big mosquito monster seemed like something she had seen somewhere. Xiaolin, what are you still doing standing here? Come here quickly. Just when the girl was a little confused about the giant mosquito monster in the sky, her mother's extremely worried cry suddenly came from beside her. The middle-aged parents had already run under a bus stop pavilion on the side of the road. They looked at her standing alone in the middle of the road with very worried expressions on her face. Everyone else was running away in panic, but Jialin was the only girl who didn't move. If that big mosquito really wanted to kill someone, he would definitely choose such a target. The girl hurriedly trotted a few steps and came to her mother's side. She couldn't help being scolded. But when the little girl looked at the flying giant mosquito monster above her head, the familiar feeling in her heart became stronger and stronger. Although she had clearly never seen this giant mosquito, she always felt that she had encountered it somewhere, but this was not quite right. If she had encountered such a huge monster before, she would never forget it. So when this little girl saw the giant mosquito monster, she was really confused, but when she realized it, she was a little scared. It is said that this giant mosquito wiped out all the metal monsters in a small group. Such fighting strength is seen by the people on Earth who understand the horror of metal monsters. It's simply very scary. And just now she was actually under the body of the giant mosquito monster. Being in a daze for so long is like looking for death. However, this giant mosquito monster seems to have no idea why it does not attack humans, and is hovering overhead and refusing to leave. On the road below, it has long since turned upside down. Some humans who had no time to escape came to the pavilion where the 3 members of the Geo family were. And they are still competing with the Geo family for position. The giant mosquito monster landed almost at this time. Jia Yan in the sky is looking at the scene below. He knew that if he appeared, he would definitely cause some commotion, and this commotion would definitely affect his family. But in order for them to get used to the existence of this giant mosquito monster, this is a necessary process. After all, Jia Yan can't stay far away from his family all the time. His purpose is to protect his family rather than just watch from a distance, so it is a good idea to let them get used to this big mosquito flying high in the sky but not disturbing people. But Jia Yan didn't expect that his family would even stand under the stop sign. They were all ostracized. When I saw my mother being squeezed by someone, she almost fell out of the stop sign. He almost flew down impulsively. But Jia Yan still resisted his impulse. This is the time to gain trust. If he does anything that harms humans, his family will definitely no longer be able to trust him, a giant mosquito monster that is always flying overhead. Fortunately, there was only a temporary commotion below. After seeing that the large mosquitoes above their heads showed no murderous behavior, some people couldn't help but quietly walked out from behind the bunker. He nervously looked at the giant mosquito monster flying above, which was only a few dozen meters high, with beads of sweat rolling down his face. This man was truly brave, and his actions brought more people out of their bunkers. The giant mosquito monster above the head still showed no excessive reaction. Suddenly, many people came out of the bunker below. I have heard that this giant mosquito monster attacked the metal monster team that was preparing to attack Tan City yesterday. At least until now, I have not heard of anyone being attacked by him, so this monster should not he attacks humans. If we don't provoke him, we should be fine. The man who walked out of the bunker first was a man who looked to be in his 30s. This man had a rough face, but Wu Guan looked like a kindly person. In addition, he was the first to venture to the outside world. A brave man, so everyone chose to listen to his words. And this giant mosquito monster seems to have no signs of attacking. Does he really not hurt humans? Almost everyone is asking this question. The three members of the Geo family also moved among the crowd. When they were avoiding the giant mosquito monster, there didn't seem to be many people on the street. However, once the crisis was resolved, hundreds of people seemed to have gathered on the road near the national highway. A crowd of thousands. Everyone, please don't worry about this monster and walk quickly. The road for people behind is blocked. Can we walk or not? Some people are complaining. Under the urging of these people, those who were still a little afraid of the giant mosquito monster above their heads and finally took action. The flow of people started to move forward. After all, staying like this is not an option. If the giant mosquito monster wants to come down and attack, there are so many people, my luck will be so bad, will the giant mosquito pick it? This is what most people think. In this tide of people, the three members of the Geo family were also mixed in the crowd, walking forward slowly. As for the little girl Geolin, she kept looking at the giant mosquito monster above her head strangely during the action. The faint feeling of familiarity made her think about something for a while. Okay, the team finally started to move again. Although I am not used to the existence of this monster like me, at least I am not as panicked as I was just now. This is also an improvement. Jia Yan looked at the flow of people below and felt a little happy in his heart. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Buletin Yu. Chapter 195. The first step is completed, and the next step is to see whether the Geo family in this team will move smoothly. Jia Yan was in the air, looking down while flying. The place he can see now is very far away. He is no longer the little mosquito whose vision was only within a few meters. The crowd below is also strange. That giant mosquito monster is really following us. This is really a weird thing in the world. Isn't this giant mosquito planning to come down and catch us when it's hungry? There were people below looking at the big mosquitoes above, with worries on their expressions, but they were helpless. If they didn't leave, the metal monsters might besieging them at some point. The only way they could survive was by moving forward. The more people are at this time, the more potential they have to burst out. Anyway, Jia Yan is flying in the air, and the people below are rushing. As time passes slowly, the people below are slowly becoming familiar with his existence. But at this time, he still couldn't get close. He could only linger 100 meters or tens of meters high in the sky. Compared with his flying speed, a human's walking speed is extremely slow. Jia Yan observed the distance while flying. The road below is full of humans. These humans are walking forward one by one, like a long queue of people with no end in sight. If nothing happens in front of this long queue, the Geo family should be fine. Jia Yan thought for a moment and flapped his wings. Fly upward. Look, that giant mosquito monster is flying up. Is it going to leave? The human voices below were far away almost quickly, and Jia Yan's body rose very quickly. 500 meters. 1000 meters. 1500 meters. At 1500 meters, Jia Yan's rise stopped. He is looking at the road ahead. Seen from a high altitude, the human world is really not that big. The neighboring counties and cities that I thought were far away are just right under my nose. And the human beings in front of Jia Yan are like little ants. There was a long line of them. One by one, they walked along the road and headed towards the endless road. Sometimes when you reach a certain height, your way of looking at things changes. Just like Jia Yan now, his way of looking at things is different from before. So now he feels like the humans below. And this disaster is not the same as before. He couldn't tell the specifics, but he just felt it. It seems that the matter is not that serious, but the problem of human beings themselves. Maybe it's more serious than the metal monster attack. It's useless for me to think so much. Anyway, such things are not what I have to consider now. After all, I am not a human being anymore. Now I only need to protect my family. The rest has nothing to do with me. Jia Yan continued to fly forward, and his idea was very simple, that is, to go ahead and explore the road conditions first. If there was any situation, he would solve the matter to avoid adding variables when his parents and little sister arrived. His figure moved forward quickly. According to Jia Yan's current speed, the distance of dozens of kilometers can be reached almost instantly. These distances are long enough for the Jia family and the others to walk, maybe even a day. So Jia Yan planned to return after seeing things at this distance. But when he was about to return, his compound eyes shrank slightly. His sight can see very far away. At an altitude of more than 1,000 meters, he can see very far away. This far distance can be said to be on the order of dozens of kilometers. Now Jia Yan is looking at dozens of kilometers. Kilometers away, at the end of his sight, he suddenly saw a slightly different scene. That silver tide. Countless human beings were crying and running away in that tide. That's... Jia Yan's heart moved slightly, and a strong sense of crisis came from that direction, which directly made him feel uneasy and his heart beat faster. This was the first time Jia Yan felt such a strong sense of fear. What is that? It's too far away, I can't see clearly. Jia Yan's heart was slightly shaken, and he looked in that direction for a while. No matter how you look at it, it feels very dangerous there. Now that Jia Yan has obtained a stronger mutation, his sensory abilities have long been out of the ordinary, and Jia Yan's biological instinctive senses have also saved him. He has lived many times, so he also believes in his feeling. You must not go on this road. Going down will definitely lead to a dead end. Jia Yan thought for a moment and did not dare to say that he went to investigate and just turned back. The world has really changed. The place in the distance used to be a relatively large prefecture-level city, but now it gives Jia Yan such a terrifying sense of threat that he couldn't even imagine it before. But I dare not imagine it anymore, it is also a reality. What I am considering now is not the issue of unrealistic reality, but the issue of how to prevent my family from that direction. At that place just now, from a distance, there were still human cries coming out. But when Jia Yan was watching, something seemed to be aware of Jia Yan's appearance, and a slender thing also turned its direction. It looks like it's going to launch something towards Jia Yan's location. But fortunately, before that, Jia Yan retreated urgently. After the slender thing no longer threatened, it seemed to give up its attack and put Jia Yan aside. It was too far over there, and Jia Yan couldn't see clearly what was there no matter how he looked. What is that? It obviously can't be human. Could it be made by metal monsters? Could this kind of monster have other characteristics? Jia Yan only felt a little chill in his heart. The mystery on this metal monster was really real. There were too many. Now that he thought about it, if he had released or induced the metal monster, it would have been the greatest sin. Is this result of carbon coating of creatures caused by Jia Yan? It's impossible. The metal monsters are so huge. Even if it weren't for me, they would still appear one day. The most I can do is make their appearance a while earlier. Jia Yan explained to himself in his heart, otherwise he would be really under great pressure. Although he is no longer a human being, he would still feel a little guilty if so many humans died because of his relationship. His speed was extremely fast, and he could reach places dozens of kilometers away in an instant, returning to the area not far from Tan City. The big mosquito came again, causing panic among the people who had just joined the fleeing team below. Only after some explanations from others who had seen Jia Yan did these people feel a little relieved. However, Jia Yan's arrival still disrupted the progress of the fleeing army below. Some people have already chosen other paths, instead of leaving it to fate to see the other person's mood under the nose of this giant mosquito monster. So some people who fled went to other roads, but Jia Yan was disappointed to find that his parents and sister were not among them. Those weird buildings dozens of kilometers away, as well as those silver tides, if Jia Yan thinks correctly, are things made by those metal monsters, and the silver tides are simply an army of metal monsters. And now at the speed of these humans, if they don't change direction quickly, they will be really in danger. More importantly, Jia Yan's family is also among these people. No, even if we use some intimidation methods, we must drive them in other directions. Jia Yan gritted his teeth in the center of the sky. From this high-altitude place, he could clearly see that the silver tide, which had been invisible just now, was now approaching very quickly. All the human teams along the way were submerged by the silver tide. Although there are still dozens of kilometers to go, at the speed of the silver tide, it won't take long to reach this place. Looking at the human team below, Jia Yan estimated that it had been about 20 minutes since his parents left Tan City. But the walking distance is only a few kilometers. With such a speed ratio, the silver tide will definitely catch up soon. There is a fork in front of you. If you enter the fork there, you will definitely be able to delay it for a while. Even if it doesn't work, it will allow other humans to use the silver metal monsters as human shields. Anyway, they can't control so much at this time. Even if more people have to die, my main purpose is to protect my family. Thinking of this place, Jia Yan's body dropped faster. He kept searching in the crowd and soon saw his parents and little sister in the vast sea of people. At this time, a family of 3 were walking among the crowd. They had only walked for a short 20 minutes, and they were already sweating. Especially Father Jia, whose legs were not fully healed, so they took action at this time. Just a burst of pain, in short, walking very slowly. It's that giant mosquito. I heard someone at that development project say yesterday that it won't harm anyone. He saved many people last night. This giant mosquito will never harm us. On the road, there is a man with firm eyes. He is telling people around him that this giant mosquito is not as cruel as people think. But just when this person finished speaking and everyone around him felt a little relieved, the man who spoke only felt a hurricane blowing above his head. Hoo ho ho! A huge mosquito fluttered over his head. Ah, the man exclaimed. Almost at this moment, a slender foot gently touched the top of his head. It picked up a few clumps of hair and frightened the man so much that he almost died on the spot. The man rolled and fell to the side of the road, and the humans around him behaved similarly. The momentum brought by this giant mosquito as it charged down was simply unimaginable. Just now this person said that giant mosquitoes would not hurt people, and now he was the first one to scream. Moreover, after this person got up from the ground in fright, he simply panicked and rushed towards the other side of the road. Reborn as an Interstellar Giant Mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 196. The big mosquito flapped its wings and slowly landed at the intersection of the 2 roads. His body was huge and terrifying, with 6 long legs stretched out, almost blocking the entire road. You can't get through here. Take that road. I remember it's also connected over there, but you have to walk a little longer, but it doesn't matter, as long as this monster doesn't chase you. Some people were brave enough to bypass the giant mosquitoes crawling on the ground and enter the road. After that, there were the 3 members of the Jia family. This was the first time since Jia Yan was reborn that he looked at each other like this with his family. A huge mosquito made the 3 of them real human beings, but at this moment, there seemed to be some mysterious power that made the 4 of them look at each other. It seems that the feeling of blood connection appears very clearly in the feelings of both parties, but it is impossible for the other party to really take it seriously. On Jia Yan's side, a warm current flows through him, and there is something in his sight. Wei Wei's emotions looked at the family in front of him. At this time, no one noticed the humanized behavior of this giant mosquito. Dad really looks older, and Mom has some more gray hair. The younger sister has grown up and looks like a big girl. Jia Yan looked at his family, the big mosquito's head was raised, and he looked like he was shining. At this time, the Geo family had already left Jia Yan's eyes. After a stream of people passed by, the big mosquito crawled down to the ground, as if it no longer had any interest in these humans. In fact, he really had no interest. If he wasn't worried that his family would come back again, he would have already taken off and left. On the human side, when they walked to the big mosquito, their breathing sounds were much quieter, and Jia Yan was deliberately ignoring them at this time. These humans could also see that this big mosquito was obviously not interested. He was willing to give way, so everyone walked past him helplessly. It is already a good thing that giant mosquitoes do not attack humans. How can we ask for more? Jia Yan watched his parents and little sister gradually go away, and then his figure gradually became taller. A faraway place at this time. The shadow of the metal monster army still did not appear. After all, the two places are dozens of kilometers apart. Jia Yan can fly there very quickly, but the army of metal monsters cannot be so fast. After all, there are still many humans who need to be slaughtered on their way. There are also those buildings that need to be destroyed. No matter how fast it is, we can't get there so quickly. Not far from the intersection where the big mosquitoes are. A girl looked at the big mosquito behind her, and the strange familiar feeling in her heart became even stronger. Jia Lin looked at the giant mosquito behind her, and the exchange of glances just now finally gave her some memory. At this time, the girl remembered the time when the Yu family took revenge, and there seemed to be a big mosquito at that time. It seemed like he was always by her side. However, although the big mosquito was considered a relatively large mosquito, it was still far from the giant mosquito. The two might be monsters of the same race, otherwise they would look at each other. How come there are similar feelings? The eldest girl finally figured it out at this time. But she probably never imagined that the big mosquito was the one she had seen before, and that this mosquito appeared here. It's not for anything else, nor does it want to hurt anyone, but it's for their family, and it's also for their family to appear in the eyes of mankind like this. His purpose is to protect the Geo family. Even if he does this, the Geo family will not know anything. No one knows that he fought with those metal monsters last night for the sake of the Geo family, and even now he is blocking the road for the safety of the Geo family. It doesn't matter if no one knows all this, all Jia Yan wants is to know it himself. He is also a member of the Geo family. Even if he is reborn, this will not change. Jia Yan is reminding himself. Finally, the Geo family moved further and further away. Slowly, their figures were no longer visible. But Jia Yan was still lying on the ground. There were still many humans at this time. Jia Yan believed that the road the Geo family took was relatively safe, so he still lay on this place and used his cold compound eyes to look at the humans passing by. No one dared to say anything, and no one dared to resist him. At most, they were surprised when they saw this big mosquito, and then silently followed the people in front and walked forward. In the face of absolute power, human beings always seem to be more submissive, and Jia Yan is crawling like this, showing no strength at all, but still no one dares to do anything to him. Could it be that the deterrent power of giant mosquitoes has reached this level? No, most humans probably don't know about Jia Yan's strength, but they are just imitating the humans in front of them. Maybe as long as one human tries to attack Jia Yan, the others will attack together. The dark giant mosquito just crawled in place, and the sunlight gradually rose until it reached the top of the head. The human tide ahead shows no sign of ending. This is just a wave of refugees from a branch of a human county-level city. It is already such a large number, which shows how terrifying the human race as a whole will be. Jia Yan couldn't even imagine how powerful the attack would be if so many humans attacked him together. But there are no ifs. Humans are such animals and can never be twisted into a rope. Of course, Jia Yan himself used to be one of these human beings, and even his current mentality is that of a human being. He really has no qualifications to criticize. Just when Jia Yan was thinking wildly, he suddenly heard bursts of noise coming from a place not far behind him. Big Mosquito let out a long sigh in his heart. He knew that the army of metal monsters had finally arrived. Look, what is that? Gold, metal monster. The human fleeing team here, a large number of humans, were screaming in fear. The army of metal monsters looks like a silver tide from a distance, rolling towards this side. Run away, some of the humans screamed and ran away quickly. There was chaos here instantly. The entire human escape team was completely in disarray. Some people ran away towards the original road, and some people rushed towards the other side road. Some people fell down. Some people lost all their luggage. There are also children whose mothers cannot be found. On the human side, there is no need for metal monsters to attack, and the losses will be heavy. Jia Yan saw all this, but he just shook his head. Then, the giant mosquito focused its attention on the tidal wave of metal monsters that were attacking in the distance. This tide. There are so many machines. They rushed forward along the road. When you enter, you can't tell how many there are, they are countless. And right in front of these metal monsters, there were about 100 or 200 humans, and each of these humans had frightened expressions. All of them were people fleeing the front, and maybe a few of them were people who had left Tan City, but they all looked the same at this time. They were all being chased by metal monsters, running for their lives in great panic. Ahead were humans running away in panic. There are also humans running for their lives in the rear. Jia Yan looked at the appearance of human beings at this time. Some people saw the person in front of them couldn't run fast and pulled them to the ground. Some people abandoned their families and ran away quickly. There are also some children. I couldn't find my parents in the crowd, so I ran helplessly with the crowd. While crying. Life is full of different situations, this is really. The big mosquito is still crawling on the ground. His head moved back and forth, looking at the humans around him. And those who fled. Behind them, there are metal monsters chasing after them. These metal monsters are about the size of a medium-sized dog. When they run, their four long legs move back and forth almost the same distance, and their speed is also extremely fast. This shows how terrifying these monsters are. As these monsters run, red light shoots out from above their heads. The power of these red lights is not as powerful as when attacking Jia Yan or those large human buildings. They are obviously controlling their energy expenditure. Although it is a small energy red light jet, the power of this red light is enough to penetrate the bodies of those fleeing humans. Poof! Puff puff puff! Several human bodies fell down in front of the big mosquito body crawling on the road. Bright red blood stains spread on the ground, infiltrating all the ground. A human man was shot through the heart, but still survived. His eyes had lost their luster. He stretched out a blood-stained arm and stretched out 5 fingers. The fingers were stained with blood. The bright red blood was dazzling under the sunlight. The big mosquito was crawling in front of this man, and his pair of compound eyes had a complex light. The man's blood-stained fingers tremblingly reached out to the cheek of a woman lying on the side. A large hole was shot out of the woman's chest by a red light from the metal monster. At this time, she was no longer breathing. There was deep sadness in the man's eyes. His fingers were extremely trembling, but he touched the woman's cheek firmly. A line of tears rolled down from his eyes. Then, the man's fingers finally lost strength and he fell gently to the ground. Like a silent and poignant love story. But their stories can be found in Chiyuan didn't get a happy ending. The last audience member is just a giant mosquito monster. Seeing the man die in front of his eyes, the antennae on the front of the mosquito's head moved slightly. Then, the large wave of metal monsters in front of them finally arrived in front of the giant mosquito with great momentum. Some people who were fleeing turned around in panic and saw this scene. The big mosquito finally shook its body slightly when countless waves of metal monsters arrived. Then, he stood in front of countless metal monsters. Slowly. Stood up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 197. In front of him were countless metal monsters like a tide. Jia Yan moved slightly with one long foot. His figure seemed to regard those metal monsters as nothing, and he lightly stepped over the dead man. Block it behind you. The giant mosquito's figure was simply arrogant in this place. He held his head high, and then under the gaze of those metal monsters. Suppress and go away step by step. There are actually ups and downs in his heart. At this time, the big mosquito felt a faint sense of identification with that man. The so-called man. Just like him, if you love someone, you will love him until life and death depend on him. The so-called man. Just do what you can to protect your family. The so-called man, even if he is weak, is still an upright existence. Jia Yan's body walked towards those metal monsters step by step. Facing countless tidal waves of huge metal monsters, as he said himself, he did not retreat at this time. He is a man. A man who can protect his family. He didn't want to be like this dead man, who could only die miserably with the person he loved. Although it seems that this man is not a good man, his biggest flaw is that he is too weak. He is a man, but just a weak man. If, like Jia Yan, he was strong enough to protect his family, why would he die? Why can't you protect the woman you like? So although he is worthy of sympathy, he is not the type that Jia Yan agrees with. Jia Yan is now working hard to prevent the same thing from happening to his family. The three members of the Jia family probably haven't escaped too far now, so Jia Yan needs to hold off these metal monsters for a while. What was in front of him was the tidal army of metal monsters. The quantity is extremely large. Jia Yan caught his eye. All metal monsters. These monsters are crawling on the mountains, on the ground, and on everything in sight. What stands in front of so many metal monsters is just one, although it looks huge. But at this time, the giant mosquito monster also seemed small. Jia Yan is still fearless. Oh my God, that mosquito. There are humans behind who saw this scene. Both eyes have expressions of disbelief. Each one of them was almost unable to breathe under the overwhelming force of those countless metal monsters. But the giant mosquito monster didn't retreat at all. Step by step, he suppressed so many metal monsters. It seems to be saying, "This is my territory. My territory. You are not allowed to enter without my permission." That kind of momentum. That kind of majesty is simply unimaginable. This is a giant mosquito monster that dares to confront the army of metal monsters. This giant mosquito monster actually won't take even a small step back in front of the army of metal monsters. Although he is already a mosquito. But he is still a man. The kind that stands tall and tall. Jia Yan's compound eyes were dim and he looked at the army of metal monsters in front of him. In his sight, there were machines full of dangers. The threat of these machines almost made his biological instincts sound the maximum alarm, telling him to escape from here quickly. But will Jia Yan escape? Won't. At least not now. His figure is still pressing forward. First, a metal monster stood in front of Jia Yan. The monster's body was shining brightly, and the barrel of the gun above its head flashed slightly with red light. The red light above its head is extremely dazzling, and there are traces of blood on its body. It can be seen that this metal monster has obviously killed many humans. But the metal monster that was so menacing before is actually a little silent now. In front of the giant mosquito, they were ready to go, with red light flashing. Being able to turn the metal monster army that had hit extremely fast before into the situation shows how terrifying the giant mosquito monster is in their minds. Snap! 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 The giant mosquito stepped on the ground, its 6 long legs lightly stomping on the ground, making a slight sound. Jia Yan held his head high. What he faced was a terrifying metal monster that only emitted red light. And after a while, these metal monsters seemed to have condensed the energy of the red light above their heads. One by one, they finally put their hind feet slightly on the ground, preparing for the next recoil impact. The attack is about to begin. Even the humans in the distance saw that a hugely powerful attack was about to unfold here. Everyone screamed and hid in a ground bunker or low-lying area on one side. The giant mosquito's compound eyes were also flashing with light. There was solemnity in his eyes, and there was also a hint of eagerness to try. He was about to launch a crazy counter-attack under the attack of this metal monster. Big Mosquito himself doesn't know how far he can achieve it. He only knows that if he doesn't try it, he will definitely regret it in the future. If he can't stop so many metal monsters, then they will chase his family, and then something will happen that he will regret forever. So before that happens, he will try to avoid it. At this time, the big mosquito has to use his full strength again. The body of a metal monster was only 2 or 3 meters away from Jia Yan. The red light of this metal monster is extremely dazzling. Finally, this dazzling time reaches its limit. Bo! Boom! A red ray of light spurted out from the barrel of his head. Aim at the big mosquito ahead. Whizzing! At the same time, streaks of red light, thought to be tongues of death-inducing flames, sprayed towards the giant mosquito. Jia Yan has not only 10 ways, but 100 ways. It's like counting in thousands. Under the attack of so much red light, even a small mountain will be bombarded into flat ground. And that's it. The giant mosquito's wings, which had been prepared for a long time, suddenly flapped and took off. At the same time, his 6 long legs suddenly changed from a state of extreme silence to a state of extreme movement. This speed is simply too fast. Extremely fast. After all, this is a time of life and death. It is impossible for a big mosquito to hide. It's impossible to turn a blind eye to so much red light. His speed was extremely fast. First, the rapid flapping of his wings reduced some of the weight of his body, and his 6 long legs suddenly began to move. 6 long legs move quickly on the ground. At this time, the big mosquito has no time to fly into the sky. So he just used his 6 long legs, like a ground creature. Just run quickly. And just running like this doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Jia Yan being a flying creature. He is indeed a flying creature. But this flying creature has long gone beyond the scope of ordinary creatures. Its 6 long legs are not comparable to ordinary ground creatures. With such strength, even if he had to run on the ground, it would be very easy. And the rapid beating of wings. This allows it to reduce its weight and increase its running speed even more exaggeratedly. So the speed of a big mosquito. It was a direct improvement, and it suddenly exceeded the highest limit of running on the ground, reaching a level that he himself could not imagine. And that's it now. One after another, those red lights attacked in the direction where he was. Hoo ho ho! The huge body of the giant mosquito actually formed a very fast afterimage on the ground. The 6-legged attack is actually not the effect of 1 plus 1 being greater than 2, but a state where 1 plus 1 is almost less than 1. After all, the movement of the 6 long legs is simply difficult to control, and when the speed reaches a certain level, the 6 legs become a constraint on each other, tightly limiting Jia Yan's speed. But fortunately, he has wings on his back. Rays of red light shot out and passed by the giant mosquito. It was so thrilling that none of the shots hit. At this time, the giant mosquitoes have actually escaped a large amount of red light coverage. The momentum of the 6 legs directly caused him to move far away from where he was, so there was not much red light that could track his true location. And when his figure was about to be locked again by all the monsters with the ability to share information, the pair of wings behind him finally flapped hard. At this time, the speed of Jia Yan's feet had made his body completely faster. The pair of huge wings behind him also have the inertial support of forward motion, so now at this forward speed, the 6 legs are gradually leaving the ground. Buzz buzz. The giant mosquito body started to fly. It sounds like a long time, but not much time actually passed before Jia Yan really soared. The sky is the home ground for a flying creature like him. But flying giant mosquitoes is not such a good choice. The army of metal monsters at this time numbered more than 1,000, which was completely different from the battle last night. Now that he was flying, he became a target. With so many metal monsters and so much firepower, it wouldn't be strange even if they turn a giant mosquito into a hornet's nest. But Jia Yan is still flying. Buzz buzz. Xiao xiao. A huge sound rang out, and the giant mosquito that broke the speed of sound suddenly spread its wings and soared. His body speed is too fast, too fast, too fast. In an instant, the speed exceeded 1,000 kilometers per hour. Bang! Just after a violent sound, this speed has exceeded the speed of sound. Whistle, roar, roar. The giant mosquito was like a flying battleship cruising in the sky. Suddenly, when it soared, its body suddenly moved. There is a sharp knife-shaped cuticle on the front foot. And stab it directly. There was a metal monster right in front of him, rapidly enlarging in front of Jia Yan's eyes. Poof! The sharp horns of the front feet pierced into the heart of this metal monster. The red-lit barrel of this metal monster suddenly became fainter. It's dead. Just before this metal monster died, a metal monster next to it suddenly burst out with a violent red light. Boom! This metal monster actually chose to self-destruct. The huge red light almost covered the color of the sun, making the whole world shine red. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 198. The following word count does not include money. Since some book friends said they wanted to add more updates, Baiyu formulated a condition for adding more updates. The current average subscription for this book is only about 170, which is too low. There is really no motivation for people to go crazy for additional updates. As long as it reaches 200 evenly, there will be a burst of 5 updates. You read that right, it is the 5th update. When 300 is evenly matched, there will be another 5 updates. So for those who read pirated books, if you want to see more updates, and don't want to see them if you like this book, please come to Cheateon.com and subscribe to the official version. Thank you. A protector or elder appears, 3 updates that day, 4 updates for the headmaster, and 5 updates for the alliance leader. Bulletin U does what he says. There is no guarantee of character even if the ticket is bounced. Crazy explosion shockwaves came out, shaking the ground, causing the humans running in front to lose their feet one by one, and all fell to the ground. The huge mosquito was directly in the huge explosion and was completely covered by the explosion. But just when every human being was completely frightened by this frightening scene, the huge and terrifying giant mosquito, under the gaze of human eyes, used its wings to make a sharp whistle. He actually broke through the flames from the huge explosion, like a prehistoric beast emerging from its cocoon, flapping its wings and rising from the huge smoke. Looking at the giant mosquito monster, it seemed that it was not really affected by the strong explosion. People cheered happily, but they soon discovered that something was wrong with them. Why should they cheer for this giant mosquito monster? It is estimated that this big mosquito has not harmed humans before. Anyway, humans think that the big mosquito at this time might really be their savior to block the army of metal monsters. If this big mosquito can't resist these metal monsters, they will definitely die. And among these humans, 2 humans had obviously just come out of Tan City. They are 2 foreigners, a father and a son. Perhaps the foreigners are not well informed, so they have just escaped from the city now. But it was precisely because of now that they could see their savior last night. Dad. It's that giant mosquito monster. He saved your life last night. A young man who looked to be only 17 or 18 years old stood in the crowd with an excited look in his eyes. Next to him was a middle-aged man, who saw a giant mosquito monster fighting in the distance. There was also a look of shock on his face. But compared to his son's excitement, he was not that happy. Last night, he encountered a battle between a giant mosquito and a metal monster, and he was already close to death. Now at this time, they actually saw more metal monsters, which could not but be said to be their bad luck. Stop looking. Wu Rongbin, leave quickly. He pulled his child and quickly retreated. In the crowd, some people were directly knocked over by the shock wave of the explosion. Some people were so frightened by the violent fighting that they hid behind the bunker and did not dare to move. However, as the Wu family father and son who have had similar experiences, these two people do not dare to stay here. The two were directly caught in the explosion of the battle. He quickly braved the fire and risked being affected by the flames of war, passing through the main road that the mosquito had previously guarded, and ran towards another road. Some people were immediately inspired when they saw the actions of the father and son, and took the risk together to pass through this intersection of the battle. More people have an adventurous heart, but with this mentality, when a young man passed a road intersection, a huge red light shot out. The young man was swallowed whole by the red light. When the red light passed, when he turned into a lifeless corpse, people's impulse suddenly stopped. No one dares to move anymore. But at this time, the battle between the giant mosquito in the sky and the one below became more intense. Rays of red light shot out. The big mosquito has made supersonic flight in the air. But it's not enough. Although this speed is fast, facing waves of coverage attacks, the big mosquito cannot completely dodge. Boom boom boom. The body of the giant mosquito was finally bathed in the explosion of red light again. Boom. Jia Yan's body shook wildly. But this attack did not cause much damage to the giant mosquito. The huge body flew directly out of the flames. And this big mosquito still has that gleaming appearance, and the azure color in his body is also displayed, which directly makes the humans below stunned. The giant mosquito monster of love can actually change its color. Some people think of those weird science fiction movies. In those movies, some monsters change color after being angered, and it's not just a simple change of color, but their combat effectiveness is greatly enhanced. Could it be that this giant mosquito monster is one of them? Jia Yan naturally didn't expect that his body would cause so many thoughts to the humans below. What he was thinking about now was how to obtain the greatest results in this battlefield. No matter what happens, these metal monsters must be completely dragged to the intersection for a while, otherwise, what he does will be meaningless. These things are not that simple. Jia Yan is taking the huge risk for the first time since this mutation to do this. The giant mosquito's body flew rapidly in the air, and the flying speed of the mosquito's body reached an unprecedented state. The muscles of both wings were extremely twisted. At this time, the big mosquito broke through its flight limit again and again. 1,500 kilometers per hour. 1,800 kilometers per hour. Boom boom boom. There were constant red rays of light hitting the big mosquito's body. This was not just passing by, but it was actually hitting his body completely, causing several flashes of blue to appear all over his body. Boom boom boom. On the body of the giant mosquito, a red light struck. Jia Yan felt a huge force suddenly coming from his body. This force was so violent that it hit his entire body and raised his head backwards. This time there are more blue colors on the giant mosquito's body. Fortunately, the attack of red light is not very strong at one time. If the metal monsters can turn their self-destruction power into red light and use it at once, then the big mosquito will not be so easy to bear. Jia Yan looked at the azure color on his body, and in the faint luster of his compound eyes, there was also a touch of azure, flickering slightly. And that's it? The big mosquito's body is even more agile. He felt within his wings. The force of the flapping was even greater. He took a moment to look at it during the flight and saw that in the muscles, the azure color was as pure as he had ever seen. That blue color has almost become a reality. Just unbelievable. But at this time, Jia Yan's heart. Suddenly there was a faint sense of satisfaction. He was satisfied with this practical test. Generally speaking, his body had gone through last night's battle. I am already familiar with attacks of this level and being attacked by metal monsters. The attack power he can withstand is greater, and his adaptability has also been greatly enhanced. Under the attack of 1,000 metal monsters, being attacked by red light is inevitable. But this kind of red light attack is for him. It's not something unbearable, his blue defense is enough to a certain extent. Defend against a certain amount of red light explosion. But Jia Yan didn't want to try that kind of self-destruction energy. Its explosion power was not something he could bear now, so the big mosquito didn't dare to go downwards at this time. But the time for testing is over. Jia Yan didn't dare to fight against metal monsters in this place just because he had really improved his combat power. Testing his strength is only part of it. The reason why he really has the confidence to stop the metal monster army here. That is, he was hanging on the front of his mid-foot, those small blue-gray pebbles. Each of these stones is green with a hint of blue, shining brightly in the sun. Jia Yan was in the air, finally no longer completely exposing his body to the attacks of the army of metal monsters. The giant mosquito turned back, and his body flew high into the sky very quickly, where there were two pure white clouds. This height is directly more than 3,000 meters, but at this time, Jia Yan has directly come to such a high altitude, as if he will no longer be affected by the cold at high altitude. Yin yin yin. The giant mosquito's back entered the clouds with a series of wild noises. As soon as he entered the two white clouds, his figure became looming and almost disappeared. The attacks of the metal monsters below also suddenly lost their target. There was a slightly flashing red light in their gun barrels. At this time, each of their figures looked ferocious. They had spent so much time and energy on dealing with a giant mosquito monster, but they still hadn't finished it. This situation made all these metal monsters slightly angry. It seems that these metal monsters actually have some emotions of their own, but their emotions are all created for fighting and war. If you can't deal with the hiding giant mosquito monster, then use these humans as a punching bag. At this time, the metal monsters aimed their gun barrels at the humans who were hiding and failed to escape in time. At this time, the humans who were still on the nearby road were all timid. They all wanted to escape, but because of the battle between giant mosquitoes and metal monsters, they were afraid of being affected and did not dare to move. It's not that these people don't know that the giant mosquito monster is just one, and it's impossible for him to stop so many metal monsters. But just now, they still didn't get the chance to escape. If they miss this opportunity, you will suffer a terrible end. Metal monsters were approaching these humans one after another. Boom boom boom. The sound of bombings below keeps coming. And it was amid the sounds of these explosions that Jia Yan, hiding in the clouds, finally breathed a sigh of relief from the dangerous battle. He's tired, so he has to run away. At this time, it's not that he doesn't want to save those humans, but his purpose is not these. If something could be done, he wouldn't mind saving a few humans, but at this time, he really had no way to do so unless he was willing to take huge risks. But obviously, it is impossible for Jia Yan to risk saving mankind. After all, he is not related to them, so why would he take this risk? What's more, he had already deliberately created a chance for these humans to escape. If they didn't take advantage of it themselves, they couldn't blame him. So he just listened to the attack of the metal monster below. His compound eyes flashed with a faint luster, but he did not move. Enter the white clouds. Jia Yan first took a short rest in the clouds. In this attack, I have mastered some methods to deal with the self-destruction of metal monsters. Although this method is also dangerous, as long as I master it well, I will have the confidence to face it next time we meet. Please subscribe. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 199. The method Jia Yan came up with was actually very simple. When he attacked for the first time, wasn't he almost affected by the self-destruction of a metal monster? But at that time, he still broke through the danger zone of self-destruction and broke out. I found that if my flying speed reaches about 1.5 times the speed of sound, the impact of the self-destruction should be very small. I don't mean very small, but as long as I see the red light explosion above the metal monster's head as soon as possible, if you fly quickly, you can break out of the explosion's impact before it happens. Jia Yan had a slight thought in his heart. He just used the power of feeding when the metal monster self-destruct, so at this time, the muscles of his wings directly turned into a blue color. And it was the explosion at that time that made his speed reach close to the speed of sound at that time, because he had just taken off at that time, and it was already very terrifying to be able to explode to around the speed of sound in a short period of time. But what Jia Yan didn't expect was that during that danger, he sensitively discovered a flaw in the metal monster's self-destruction power. That's what I was thinking about at this time. Before the metal monster exploded, the red light characteristics were too obvious. Of course, the characteristics before he blew himself up were too obvious, but it only lasted less than a second, and only Jia Yan was so perverted. Able to break through a distance of several hundred meters in less than a second and escape to a safe place. Very good. After knowing this, I will definitely have more confidence to face metal monsters in the future. Their biggest threat to me is their self-destruction power, and this self-destruction power has a weird power. With this power, the destructive power is simply astonishing. But now that I know that as long as the flying speed reaches 1.5 times the speed of sound, I can see the signs before they self-destruct, then things are simple. Jia Yan thought so much, but the movement of his feet did not stop. The small blue-gray pebbles hanging in his feet were all hung on the mid-foot, precisely because the combat effectiveness of this mid-foot was not very strong. The effect is not great either. So it's very good practice to hang things there. There is a plastic bag there. There are several blue-gray pebbles hanging in this plastic bag. In fact, Jia Yan was a little scared looking at them. If he hadn't avoided the self-destruction attack just now, then the metal monster's self-destruction attack would have happened. Maybe he won't die directly. But these blue-gray stones hanging on his body are likely to be detonated. That's a really big joke. I really don't dare to carry this thing like this. If I'm not careful, it will be affected by a missile or other attack. Maybe I won't die, but these little things hanging on my body will explode. It's not enough to kill you. You know, each of these is equivalent to the self-destruction power of a metal monster. Jia Yan was slightly nervous as he took down these blue-gray pebbles. The plastic bag only contained 5 small blue-gray pebbles. These pebbles were taken out of the laptop bag by Jia Yan before escorting his family. His laptop bag was placed on the balcony of his home. After all, distance is not as difficult as a natural chasm for Jia Yan. So this time he put his laptop bag on his balcony until he found a better hiding place. It's not too late to take it out again. Fortunately, this decision was made relatively correctly. Otherwise, I don't know if carrying that bag will hinder the battle, but it will definitely be damaged in the battle just now. After all, the laptop bag does not say that it can defend super well. Overloaded power. Affected by the red light, the wind can blow it away. If you can save the plastic bag tied to your foot, you're lucky. Finally, Jia Yan took 2 of the 5 blue-gray pebbles on his front feet. Now, let our carnival continue. Jia Yan's compound eyes were faintly looking at the metal monsters slaughtering humans below. After that, the big mosquito's wings flashed for a while. Yin yin yin. The giant mosquito made a loud noise, and his body gradually flew out from the thick clouds. 3,000 meters high in the air, the scenery is completely different. The metal monsters and humans seen here are extremely small. The killings between them are like ants killing each other. It is a bit unreal and the feeling of blood is much less. But Jia Yan didn't really think so. He saw the brutality of those metal monsters, it was simply an atrocity. As he was flying downward, he saw a metal monster chasing an 11 or 12-year-old girl on a road below. This little girl is somewhat similar to Jia Yan's sister Jia Lin when she was a child. Jia Yan had a slight idea in his mind that he should save this little girl. But just as he was flying downward, the pursuing metal monster had already chased in front of the little girl, and a slight red light shot out. Bo! The sound was crisp and clear, and the red light shot through the little girl's body. Asshole! Looking at the little girl lying in a pool of blood, Jia Yan felt anger rising in his heart. His compound eyes flashed with a faint fierce light. The downward flight speed suddenly exceeded the speed of sound. Bang bang bang. Jia Yan in the air kept accelerating, and with that downward inertial force, his speed almost reached the maximum limit he could achieve. The low temperature felt around the body has also been extremely reduced. But at this moment, he had a fire in his heart. This flame makes him fearless. The coldness in his body became less terrifying. At this moment, the body of the big mosquito reached the sky above the battlefield at extremely high speed. There are still so many metal monsters gathering in this area. They were killing each other together, killing the humans running around on the ground one by one. The unarmed human civilians were completely helpless in front of these metal monsters, unable to even resist at all. A couple holding a child hugged each other while the child cried loudly. In front of them, 2 metal monsters were outflanking them, and at this time, the metal monster had already lit up the red light on its head. In just a moment, these 2 metal monsters would emit red light, connecting the 2 couples. Kill the children in your arms together. The 2 couples stared at the metal monster in front of them in fear, and they were trembling. But he still held the child tightly. It seems that he hopes that he can use his body to block the red light and save the child's life. But this is impossible. Metal monsters will basically make certain judgments before attacking. They don't waste energy, but they don't look down on the defense of things either. At this time, there are 3 human beings in front of us, so we should follow the standard of 3 human beings. Use the energy. The red light of the 2 metal monsters is even worse. If nothing unexpected happens, this attack will break through the 2 people's defenses and kill the children in their arms together. Even if the child was not killed, could a child who could not even walk safely escape from this hellish battlefield? Impossible. The couple closed their eyes and waited for death. The moment when 2 metal monsters are about to attack. Boom. A huge and majestic figure with a violent momentum. Falling from the sky. Boom boom boom. His body exceeded the speed of sound, and his pair of compound eyes reflected a strange light under the sunlight. The giant mosquito monster actually charged directly in front of these 2 metal monsters. His speed is too fast. The body can easily break through the speed of sound. At this time, the downward dive was even faster than ever before. At this time, the metal monsters can't stop such a big mosquito at all. Which sharpshooter can shoot it at a speed that breaks the speed of sound? Even if the metal monster is a monster that shoots very accurately, it is helpless when faced with such flying speed, and it is impossible to react. Boom boom boom. So when the giant mosquito monster came to the battlefield again, all the metal monsters had no time to react. His violent body was aimed head-on at a metal monster, and the sharp knife-shaped horns of his forefoot stabbed forward. Poof! After a beautiful front stab, the giant mosquito monster broke through the sky again with a handsome back. The other metal monster that was about to chase the couple had given up on the two in front of it under the threat of the giant mosquito. A human couple, with their gun barrels shining brightly, fired continuously towards the airspace where the giant mosquito monster was. Jia Yan really attracted the hatred of metal monsters. When his body continued to appear in the clouds, all the metal monsters continued to focus on him. At this time, it was the time for those humans to escape. Human beings, under the nose of the metal monster in front of them, are all about to be forced to a dead end. But after the giant mosquito monster appears like this, they suddenly have more opportunities to escape. Although most people were still turned into lifeless corpses under the red light shot by the metal monster who reacted at will, many of these people still had a chance to escape. Very well, gather a little more, gather a little more. A giant mosquito with a dark blue color is flying in the sky. Jia Yan flew out head-on and was already attacked by several red light attacks, but he didn't show any signs of surprise. This is inevitable. He was not paying attention to whether he was being attacked, but with his compound eyes, he was paying attention to the large wave of metal monsters below. Under his attraction, they gathered in his direction one by one. Each of these metal monsters were all very special. With hatred for Jia Yan, although their red light attacks could not bring much damage to Jia Yan at once, they still poured all their attacks on Jia Yan's body as much as possible. It may not matter if Jia Yan hits it once or twice, but the energy of the red light attacking the body gradually increases, and the blue color on the giant mosquito's body gradually increases. There are faint marks on his body. This mark is the first scar. You know, Jia Yan's body withstood more than 20 red light attacks in one breath. Even if he could hold on, it would gradually become difficult for him. But Jia Yan was still flying above the head of the metal monster army and had no intention of leaving the battle area. Under the covering attacks of more than 1,000 metal monsters, his giant mosquito was only attacked more than 20 times for such a long time, which can be said to be extremely powerful. Since the beginning of the war, Jia Yan has only eliminated 5 metal monsters. Although this is because the number of enemies is too large, all this is not in line with Jia Yan's character, who will bite you flesh and blood once he fights. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. Jia Yan indeed has different thoughts. Finally, in the air, he saw a wave of metal monsters on the ground, finally gathering together. Finally gathered. The giant mosquito's compound eyes lit up with blazing light. At the same time, looking for the book. In one of his front feet, the blue-gray pebble that had been grasped for a long time was thrown out directly at supersonic speed. An inconspicuous little stone. When this thing appears on the battlefield, no one will notice it at all. But Jia Yan kept staring at it. He is looking forward to it in his heart. Finally, the pebble hit the ground downwards at a speed that exceeded the speed of sound. Right at the center of a group of hundreds of metal monsters. The look of anticipation in the big mosquito's compound eyes became even more obvious. Give me. Explode. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 200. Boom boom boom. The sound of huge explosions and destruction spread from the ground. A small stone exploded on the ground. But the power of the explosion it caused was completely different from that caused by a mere pebble. Boom boom boom. Rolling hot flames rose from the ground, mixed with fiery red light, roaring and rolling, and the projectile soaring into the sky also splashed high. The color of the fire swallowed up all the sunlight in the sky, and the hurricane caused by the shock wave. Even Jia Yan, who was 200 meters high in the sky, felt the shock wave and hot oppression of this violent wind. The huge explosive power of the blue-gray pebbles is simply frightening. Countless gravel and debris flew up in the sky, and at this time, Jia Yan could see some metal monsters flying out of the explosion center directly in the center of the explosion, flying all over the sky. Many of these metal monsters have turned into several petals. Jia Yan keenly discovered that about 1/3 of these monsters were actually able to move. The huge explosion below was obviously extremely shocking. Jia Yan's small blue-gray stone actually caused such a violent attack power. This situation did not disappoint Jia Yan. The ground was rumbling, and some of the humans who had fled far away were knocked to the ground by the shockwave of explosive energy. Some people rolled into the grass beside the road and fell upside down. Jia Yan is flying in the sky, his compound eyes flashing faintly. Rather than just seeing the power of the explosion, he would rather see how much damage the metal monster below had suffered. After all, the defense of the metal monster was also extremely terrifying in his opinion. If it were just an ordinary explosion, he even thought that an explosion of this magnitude would not be enough to cause huge damage to the metal monster. However, when the blue-gray pebbles exploded, they had a very strange penetrating power in them. Jia Yan's exaggerated defense was almost killed by it. So how much damage can it cause to these metal monsters? It's still worth looking forward to. The billowing smoke filled the entire ground with smoke and dust. The rumbling sound continued, but after the explosion lasted for a short time, the sound gradually became lower. Finally, the center of the explosion beneath the earth gradually revealed his true face. The temperature of the entire air has increased by dozens of degrees. In this southern weather, the temperature is not very low at this time, coupled with such a high explosive heat flow. The whole temperature suddenly felt hot. But the temperature at the center of the explosion is absolutely unimaginable. As a creature who has enjoyed this feeling of high temperature, Jia Yan almost didn't want to recall that feeling. Just thinking about it made him feel desperate. Soon. Finally it slowly dispersed. Jia Yan's compound eyes became even brighter. His body is still in the air. Get hit by those metal monsters. But the red light at this time was much less. After all, hundreds of these metal monsters were caught in the power of the explosion at one go. Although most of them are on the periphery of the explosion power. But some of them were blown far away, and some were thrown upside down. It took some time to react. Finally, after Jia Yan escaped another wave of red light attacks, his compound eyes continued to faintly see that in the scorched earth below, there was a faint shadow, emerging from the dust. It was a hellish scene. A huge explosion crater with a diameter of about 20 meters appeared on the entire ground. Nothing existed in this pothole, but near this pothole, the entire ground was struck by a huge explosion, as if it had been cut off. And in this place, all the cement and stones were transformed. Make that kind of bullet-like thing that splashes out due to the explosion. A nearby building became pitted. And right next to this pitted ground, there are dozens of broken shells of metal monsters, lying quietly on the ground in this place. Sometimes, it is said that the battlefield is very hot, but that is not necessarily the case. Sometimes, when you are really on the battlefield, you will find that the silence around you is terrifying. And even in that hell scene of explosions, it seemed very quiet. Dozens of metal monster bodies lay there, and the big mosquito here was still dodging attacks one after another in the countless red lights. Comparing the movements and stillness, the scene after the explosion over there looks very strange. Oh, there are still only a few dozen, less than 100. Such an exaggerated attack can only cause so much damage to the metal monsters. The metal monsters are really too powerful. Jia Yan originally expected to cause damage to at least 100 metal monsters, but the current scene obviously disappointed him. There are only about a few dozen metal monsters lying on the ground unable to move. Even if the others lose 1 or 2 legs, they will not lose much combat effectiveness. At least they still have the ability to attack the giant mosquito monster above their heads. Jia Yan finally understands the current dilemma of human beings. Such a powerful attack is not much different from the power of ordinary missiles. However, such an attack still cannot cause much damage to the metal monster. This is why Jia Yan tried his best. Only then did the metal monsters gather together. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to cause such a huge killing effect. Hey, these metal monsters actually separated. They were able to change their tactics so quickly. They are obviously smart or controlled by someone. The previous method can't be used. Even if you throw another blue-gray pebble, it won't be enough. It only caused the loss of dozens of metal monsters, and it did not have much impact on the entire strange metal smell army. But that doesn't mean we won't lose it, but we need to pay attention to tactics. Jia Yan's compound eyes became even more gleaming and lustrous. The giant mosquito's body suddenly made a dive in the air. He quickly attacked downwards. While these metal monsters haven't recovered from the previous explosion, give them a bigger blow. So Jia Yan attacks downward. Explosion plus melee combat, this is Jia Yan's current battle plan. It seems that this battle will continue for a while. It was at this moment that Jia Yan, from an unexpected place, focused his attention on this unprecedented battle. That is, hundreds of kilometers above this battle, there is a high-tech thing weighing several tons, observing this battle with its eyes. Hundreds of kilometers above the Earth. That is already the scope of the universe. That's right. That's a satellite. A Chinese spy satellite. Its name is Spy 7, which is a newer spy satellite from China. Precisely because of the heat-sensitive effects of these spy satellites, the huge battle here has attracted the attention of this satellite. In a related intelligence analysis system of China. At this time, all the staff were stunned. Dozens of people looked at the graphics sent by the satellite, and everyone was extremely shocked. None of these people received it. There was news about the battle between the giant mosquito monster and the metal monster last night, so now I saw a huge giant mosquito monster fighting an army of thousands of metal monsters. While fighting hard, they all had expressions of disbelief. These people all know the combat power of metal monsters very well. Especially in the past few days, they have received messages from above, saying that they should pay more attention to the gathering of metal monsters. If you see where metal monsters gather in large numbers, the highest level of the country. Depending on the situation, we will decide whether to give those metal monsters a blow with some nuclear weapons. But it's them. This was the first time I saw a large army of metal monsters. When I wanted to report to the top, I found that another soldier was already attacking these metal monsters. That is another new type of creature that is generally accepted in this world, a monster commonly known as the giant mosquito. This creature was actually engaged in a fierce battle with the metal monster. Although the numbers were very different, the battle was still very fierce. What is going on? A giant mosquito monster's combat power is actually so strong. Fighting against an army of thousands of metal monsters alone is simply. There was a researcher who was analyzing intelligence, with a look of horror on his face. Several other people had the same expression. Since the metal monsters invaded the surface world for more than a week, it has been determined that their actual combat power is completely out of proportion to their thin appearance. They are simply extremely powerful. Just look at a recent example. The Huaxia Kingdom invested nearly 25,000 men in a huge battle. The opponent they faced was an army of only 3,000 metal monsters. However, the situation was that the Huaxia army suffered a disastrous defeat, and the metal monster army only lost a few hundred. In a battle called Counterattack yesterday, the Stars and Stripes used almost all the weapons and equipment of the Stars and Stripes except for nuclear strike methods. Find the book, but this counterattack was not successful. 30,000 soldiers faced only more than 5,000 metal monsters, but in the end, only more than 17,000 soldiers were able to retreat. And this army, which is said to have the strongest equipment and actual combat capabilities in the world, has caused losses to the metal monster army, but only more than 800. So today, after emergency consultations between several major nuclear-armed countries, these countries unanimously decided that several major countries will launch a nuclear strike called retaliation at the same time. To deal with these metal monsters, let out the biggest roar that mankind has ever dominated this earth. However, in the process of using satellites to find targets, this huge battlefield outside Tan City was discovered by these humans. The combat power of 1,000 metal monsters is already equivalent to that of a normal human army of 10,000 people. If they did not have the burden of energy, their actual combat power would be far more than that. But a metal monster with such combat power, enough to defeat a human army of 10,000 people, actually fought a giant mosquito monster outside such a small city, and was in such a miserable situation. Could this mean that the giant mosquito monster in the picture, just one, is basically equivalent to a human army of 10,000 people? Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 201. This is unbelievable. This giant mosquito monster is bigger than the giant mosquito reported by the TV media before. Could it be that there are many more giant mosquitoes like this? If every one of them is so terrifying. One is equivalent to an army of 10,000. 10 are equivalent to an army of 100,000. If there were 100, isn't it equivalent to a million-strong army? This, quickly, tell the information to the superiors and continue monitoring, someone in charge spoke quickly. The fighting power of the giant mosquito monster is simply frightening. Although I have heard about giant mosquitoes before, there has never been a time when it has made people feel so shocked. Human beings don't know that their so-called giant mosquito race is just one, and this giant mosquito has only appeared once in human sight. The fighting power of this giant mosquito is like riding a roller coaster, soaring towards an extremely high level. Jia Yan is surprised by the fighting power of those metal monsters. In fact, his own fighting power is what should surprise people. After all, after he was reborn, he was just a little mosquito that started out as a little kid. To get to this point, he didn't know how much energy and effort he spent. But now this hard work has borne fruit, and it's finally time to reap the rewards. His efforts may have been seen by God. There is no failure if you work hard, there will always be a day when the results of your efforts will be shown. Boom boom boom. The giant mosquito monsters and metal monsters did not notice the observers in space. They are still engaged in their fiercest battle. Jia Yan lowered his body, and while a metal monster was still in a daze after the explosion of blue-gray stones, one of its front legs had already thrust forward. Poof! The sharp knife-shaped horns on the front feet pierced into the unsuspecting heart of the metal monster. But at this moment, the red light from the barrel of this metal monster's head was about to become intense. But before that, Jia Yan's sharp knife-shaped horns on his front feet had pierced directly into his body. Penetrate hard. Immediately destroy its internal structure and completely destroy it. Metal monster. Die. But at this moment, the big mosquito turned around with its strange figure, making a super big turn that was impossible for a human fighter plane. Rise directly upward. And next to this completely destroyed metal monster, there was suddenly a huge red light in the barrels of the 5 metal monsters. Then, one by one, their bodies suddenly filled with red light. Boom boom boom. This explosion was more violent than any before. The violent explosion of 5 metal monsters, the power of this explosion is simply incredible. Jia Yan had already stabbed the metal monster to death. He was already prepared that the metal monster would self-destruct to hurt him, so he flew high into the sky. But he didn't expect that there would be 5 metal monsters that would self-destruct so decisively. Except for the sky, it can be said that no matter which direction he chose to escape just now, he would be annihilated by the self-destruction of the metal monster. Fortunately, Jia Yan made the right choice. In the sky and on the earth, the only place he remembers is the sky that belongs to him. This direction will always be his home field. So at this time, Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed with faint light, and there was a series of explosions and flames at his feet. The body of the giant mosquito soared in the firelight. The huge body quickly rose into the air, and a huge shockwave followed behind him. This shockwave caused him to rise even faster, and at this time, Jia Yan discovered that there were actually many metal monsters in this scene. In the explosion, everything that was blown up was completely destroyed and could no longer move. This is as much explosive power as the green-gray pebbles in my hand now. It seems that it is a very good idea to detonate them once. If it is possible next time, it will be done again. Jia Yan looked at it looking down. The strange light in the compound eyes became even worse. Jia Yan's battles have always been like dancing on a pole. But this time he was really very lucky. After all, the 5 metal monsters self-destruct against him this time, which was the most powerful damage he had ever encountered. If Jia Yan had not chosen to fly upward just now, he would have definitely crashed into the self-destructing blockade of 5 metal monsters. He would definitely be seriously injured. But a lot of time for today's battle has passed. Jia Yan began to feel the fatigue and pain in his body. He knew that he was fighting 1,000 metal monsters this time. It can be said that it has reached the final stage. Thinking of this, the ruthlessness in Jia Yan's heart became even more obvious. Since I have brought them all out, why don't I let you have a taste? Thinking of this, Jia Yan directly buckled the other 4 small blue-gray pebbles that had been stuck on the midfoot and hindfoot, and directly buckled them on the forefoot. Middle. Hoo ho ho. The body of the big mosquito flew to a height of 1,000 meters. From this height, he could see metal monsters. Under the earth, they were like strong ants, constantly spraying red fire towards him in the sky. And some metal monsters are already chasing the humans along the road. After all, it is impossible for Jia Yan to intercept all the metal monsters. It is true that his combat power is strong, but at most he will only be entangled with these metal monsters for a while, so now he is just delaying time. He happens to be a little tired, so at this time, he decided to stop this battle. Some of these monsters have already pursued the road my family walks on. However, as I have been delaying for a while, their pursuit has been very slow, and I have killed so many of them that they are no longer something to be afraid of. When the time comes, I can rush over and wipe them out. Jia Yan looked at the metal monsters that were quickly moving away over there. These metal monsters could not destroy themselves here, and they seemed to have finally discovered that the big mosquito had an insurmountable advantage, that is, flying. So some of them started to move forward, while the other part stayed and continued to entangle with Jia Yangxiang in the sky. But they wanted to entangle, but Jia Yan didn't want to. So after his compound eyes flashed faintly, he paused slightly. Immediately afterwards, his speed seemed to make the wings behind this meal. Keep flying furiously. Whistle, roar, roar. A huge noise sounded. Wait until the speed breaks through the speed of sound again. Jia Yan threw a small pebble in his front foot downwards. Whoosh. The slight sound of breaking the air kept ringing. The pebble hit the concrete floor quickly. Jia Yan, who was above, watched the scene calmly. Nothing unexpected at all. After the small blue-gray stone hit the ground, it exploded into a huge fire. The red flame seemed to transform from the blue-gray color, covering the sky in an instant. Boom boom boom. At this time, some metal monsters crowded together to avoid the impact of the fire. However, the big mosquitoes in the sky also grasped this opportunity. Another small bluish-gray stone on his front foot was immediately thrown downward. Boom boom boom. The fiery red flames erupted again, completely covering the color of the sky and the earth. 2 huge explosions of blue-gray stones completely disrupted the entire formation of the metal monsters. But at this time, Jia Yan did not attack them to take advantage of the victory. After his body dispersed the formation of these metal monsters, he directly pursued the road in the other direction. His speed was not fast, but the metal monster below seemed to be in a state of confusion, so he did not suffer much volley. Not long after, his eyes lit up and he saw the metal monsters at the front of the road. This is the front line of the metal monsters. In the previous battle to siege Jia Yan, they did not participate. The number of this small force is not large, just over 30. However, even more than 30 metal monsters can cause great harm to a fleeing human team. The metal monsters in the rear are basically traveling along the main road, so now Jia Yan only needs to deal with these dozens of metal monsters to give his family an extra layer of safety for the rest of their trip. He didn't hesitate. He threw the only 2 blue-gray pebbles left in his feet directly downwards. Boom boom boom. Several voices came from below, and Jia Yan looked at it slightly in the sky. Discover directly. Sure enough, most of the metal monsters below died instantly. The remaining ones also had their bodies damaged, and some had half of their bodies split open. Jia Yan even felt that even if he didn't go down to deal with them, they would soon stop functioning. However, Jia Yan would not take this matter of resignation seriously. So almost before the smoke and dust below was about to dissipate, he had already fluttered his wings and flew downwards. Pu-chi, Pu-chi. Not long after, the tired body of the giant mosquito took off again. At this time, all the metal monsters on the road here were dead. The remaining ones, even through the mysterious induction between the metal monsters, the induction. After the battle here, I looked here for a while, and then walked through that road silently. The metal monster actually compromised like this. Jia Yan felt a little relieved. If the remaining metal monsters insisted on moving in this direction, then he would have no choice but to continue fighting to the death. Fortunately, they didn't do that. At this time, Jia Yan finally felt relieved from his war mentality. His wings could hardly flap. Tired and scarred. He couldn't remember how many times his body had been attacked by red light.